All right, so here's a little intro sharpening video. First, and arguably most importantly, is your setup. You don't want to be sharpening on a prep table that wobbles back and forth, right? So here we have a nice sturdy table. I've got a plastic hotel pan. Reason the plastic's best is because it's actually flat on the bottom, whereas a lot of aluminum stainless pans are slightly rounded, and you want a nice firm base so when you're pushing and pulling, it doesn't slide back and forth. So let's start with flattening this sharpening stone, because that's extremely important to get a nice, straight, consistent edge. And I do this every time I sharpen. Sometimes after as well, just to save time the next time I'm here to sharpen. So just get yourself a nice piece of graphite, pencil lead, whatever it is. Some people use Sharpie, but I don't, because it soaks in, and you're going to have to grind a lot more of the stone away to get the marks out. All right, so I have a diamond flattening plate. Just get it wet. Do a few passes, cover every square inch of the stone. And check the work. It's very predictable that most of your scratches left over, or your pencil is going to be somewhere in the center. Just a little bit left here. Having a nice sponge in your setup is also good too. Wiping the knife clean, getting a good amount of water up on your stones. So now all the pencil's gone. But you see we're left with some very sharp edges at the front and the back. So just at a 45-degree angle, doesn't have to be perfect. Just take those sharp corners off. And then hit each corner as well. Now our stone's ready to sharpen. All right, here I have a big old chef's knife. First thing I'm gonna do is make sure it's dry. Then I'm gonna take a Sharpie, and I'm gonna Sharpie along the edge, about the thickness of the tip of the Sharpie itself. If you're sharpening and all of this Sharpie is being ground away by the stone, your angle on the knife is way too acute. So you're probably below 15 degrees. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find somewhere between 15 and 20 degrees, which if you lay the knife down flat, come up to 45, and then do that somewhere in the center, that's about where you want to be. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one nice long stroke a few times. I'm going to get that water off. As you can see, I have a very thin band of ground steel. So that's how I know my angle's good. If I was any higher, it'd be a little bit smaller. But if I was any lower, which is what you don't want to do, it's the biggest mistake when you're scratching up the knife all up here when you're trying to sharpen. If you're trying to thin the bevel, then scratching, an inch behind that Sharpie mark is okay. But we're talking about finding an apex in the steel. So this very thin line is what I want to maintain. And I don't want to grind away the rest of that Sharpie mark. Now that I've established my angle, and I know my angle's good based off of this nice shiny primary bevel, what we're doing when we're sharpening is we're trying to create a burr. So when I'm sharpening on this side, this burr is going to curl up on this side. So I'm going to try to use as much as the stone as I can. I'm going to pick that angle using light pressure, especially on this stone, which is 220 grit. You do not have to be that aggressive unless you have a very fat edge knife. I'm just going to go all the way down, and I'm going to start checking for the burr. So we were sharpening this way, which means the burr is coming up on this side. So when I check, I face that ground line towards me, and I feel like this. And when you start to feel a burr, it's going to tug against your skin. And I can already feel a very small burr forming on this side, mostly at the tip, which is where the steel is usually thinnest. And down here, I know I have some work to do, but then I start to feel a little bit of grab in my skin up towards this point. And you see how fast that was? Well, that's because I have a very thinly ground knife. This is a very high performance knife. Your knives, if they're very well used and sharpened a lot, you're going to have to grind a lot more to get that burr. But as long as your angle is consistent, that's the most important thing. 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, it doesn't matter. As long as you're consistent, you just need to form an apex. And all the angle is being controlled with my backhand, while my left hand is just providing pressure above that edge. Very light pressure, especially at the lower grit stones. And after a few passes, I'm going to start feeling for the burr. I start to feel it right about right here. And I feel it all the way up to the tip. So I know I just have a little bit of more work to do down here. Sometimes the grit of the stone can feel like a burr, so keeping the knife nice and clean is important. There we go, I feel a burr there, all the way up. It's nice and consistent, not taking off too much steel, because you want to sharpen as little as possible to form the apex, or you're just going to kill the life of your knife. Now we're going to do the other side. A lot of times your fingers is going to take off the Sharpie, so just keep applying it to make sure you're not sharpening at too low of an angle. So this is the back side of the knife. You can see it's all Sharpie. Then I'm just going to take my angle and just in one nice fluid stroke, almost like you do on a honing rod. And then I'm going to check it just to make sure that I'm only taking off a little sliver at the edge, and I'm not hitting down here. Now it's almost to the end. There we go. Nice, thin grind line. Now how you do your backside edge, you can do it so many different ways. I just face the spine directly towards me. I use my index finger and my thumb on the spine to keep that angle. And then as I get closer to me, I point the edge away from me. Because my pressure is on the pull stroke, not on the pushing stroke. I'm like pushing, 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 letting off, pushing, letting off, pushing, letting off. Making sure I'm not grinding any of that Sharpie away. It's looking very consistent and good. Since I just did a couple of passes, remember the burr forms on the opposite side you're sharpening. And on the second side, you should be developing a burr much quicker. And I know I have some more work to do up at the tip because the burr is pretty pronounced all the way up until about these front 2 inches. There we go, burr at the tip, burr down, 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 good. Nice, consistent. You can see all my Sharpie's still there except for that little hairline grind mark. After you've gotten a burr on both sides, we're going to do what's called stropping, which is just one clean motion at the exact same angle you were sharpening at. Heel to tip, tip to heel, doesn't really matter. But on this side, I start at the tip. Nice light pressure. You do not have to, if the knife is flexing under the force of how you're stropping, then you're using too much pressure. Do like 4 on that side. This side I feel like it's more comfortable to go heel to tip. Just in one nice motion. Smaller knives, you can just do this one-handed. But I usually have a support hand at the tip for longer knives because this is a pretty big knife. That was about 4. Now we're going to do 3. It's nice, light pressure, consistent angle. What we're doing is we're evening out the grind on the edge. Because when you're pushing like this, it's not super consistent, but it's the most efficient way. So now we're just smoothing out that bevel by doing clean strokes. Two, 1, 1. And what we're also doing is we're working that burr back and forth to make it weaker. And so since our last stroke was like this, we know that burr is up on this side. So we're going to deburr on the stone on this last one. So we're going to take the exact same angle as our sharpening and stropping angle, and I'm just going to trace one thin line. That way I'm pulling the burr off the edge. And you can sometimes see the burr when you do that, but here it's just dark metal flakes. So we're going to do that again. Come in this direction, nice and light. Deburr. Nice and light. Deburr. Clean and dry everything off. Give the stone a little flatten for next time. Then we're going to go up and grit. All right, so I'm jumping to a very fancy 800 grit diamond stone. But if you're coming off a 220, you might need to go to a 500 and then to an 800. But since this is diamond abrasive, it's aggressive enough yet fine enough so that I can make that big jump. The reason I have this is because the amount of time that I'm spending sharpening should be very short to be efficient. But you don't need super fancy stones. You can just get, normal Japanese soaking stones. I'd say 220, 500, 800, 1200, and that's probably all you need for culinary applications.
And the higher the grit of the stone, the longer it's going to take to form a burr. I usually do 3 or 4 full passes of the edge. Then start checking for a burr. And I already have a nice fine burr because this stone is very nice. It might take you longer. I'm going to switch to the other side. I'm going to feel for the burr on the opposite side. Very small one. So we're going to keep going. A little bit more. Get that burr a little bit more pronounced. There we go. Now we're going to strap again. Nice, light, long, consistent strokes. Your stone sounds gritty. Clean it off. On the D-burr.
And about the 800 grit, I'm going to start checking the edge. 800 grit's pretty aggressive. A few different ways you can check the edge. One is on your thumbnail. And when you pull on the thumbnail, it should get stuck in your thumbnail. Obviously, do not push very hard. You're just barely pulling on it. That did not scare the shit out of me. So we're just pulling to see if it gets stuck in the nail. Another way is you use these 3 pads of your fingers, and your skin should not slide on the edge. Be very gentle. What you're looking for is the edge is grabbing your skin, and it's not easy to slide. And that feels pretty good. So now we're going to go up and grit.
I'm jumping to a 4,000. It's a very unique 4,000. You don't have to go much higher than 1,200 or 2,000. But this one has a high level of polish and refinement, yet keeps the edge aggressive enough for culinary tasks.
If you want a good place to for sharpening stones, I'd suggest JapaneseKnifeImports.com or SharpeningSupplies.com. Sharpeningsupplies.com is going to have a huge, overwhelming selection, but there's a lot of reviews on there. You can also go on Reddit or kitchen knife forums to get people's input on what sharpening stones to get. But at the end of the day, you just need something that has a good review. That's not too expensive for your budget.
So now it's nice and flat. Now we do the same thing. Try to keep that same consistent angle that you had when you started. Sometimes I start with the tip at the front of the stone and then the heel. Sometimes I'll switch it up just to use every square inch of the stone so it wears evenly. Do the tip at the front. As long as your angle's consistent, your pressure's consistent, it's not too aggressive. Doesn't really matter. And again, the higher grit you go, the longer it's going to take to form that burr. So once I'm on a finishing stone, I'll usually wait 6, 7, 8 full passes of the edge to start checking for the burr. And up at your finishing stone level, the burr's going to be very, very slight. So it's important to clean everything off so you make sure you're not just feeling grit from the stone. And towards the heel, it feels very smooth, but up here towards the tip, it's grabbing my skin just a little bit. There. Slight, and then it starts to taper off. And then down here, it's very slight. So I know I'm good from here up, so now I'm just going to focus on this heel section. There we go. Nice and consistent all the way up. Clean it off, clean the knife off. Start on the other side. Going for the burr. Not much at the tip, a little bit here in the center, not much at the heel. So I'm going to focus on the heel. And then the tip. Feeling pretty good, very slight. At least it's feeling even, so I'm just going to spend a little bit more time to make that burr a little more pronounced. Alright, it's feeling pretty good. Clean my stone off. Clean the knife off. Now stropping and deburring. Especially when the stones get up to a higher grit, you want to be very light pressure. Because even though the stones feel the same hardness, because they're just bricks, the abrasives in the higher grit stones are very aggressive. So if you push too hard on them, you can create microchips in your edge. Get that grit off there.
I'm going to deburr on the stone. Now that I'm confident that it's nicely deburred, I'm going to make sure that everything's real clean again, and I'm going to go real lightly, keeping that same angle. Just alternating. All right. Just going to dry this puppy off.
Next up is optional.
And I'm going to take this over to a leather strop. This has 3-micron diamond paste in it, but you can just use bare leather. And you're going to do the same stropping motion, which will just take off any additional burr. And the ultimate test is a little paper towel to see if I did a good job. And just cutting it's not good enough. When you're cutting paper, you're cutting paper towel, like really listen to the edge. And I can tell that somewhere here in the middle, it's being pretty grabby. Like right around there. So I'm just going to continue to strop, really light pressure. There we go. Feels and sounds a lot better.